Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. One of the best ways to grow is to pause and reflect on our life's journey. Many of us have experienced social isolation over the last couple of years due to the pandemic, but have not always taken the time to appreciate the impact this may have had on our lives. There may be some nuggets of knowledge packed away in our moments of reflection, tucked away in the NEST and ROPE acronym are reminders about how we think, the importance of recovering from trauma, and having healthy relationships and protecting our emotions. Have you ever wondered how your emotions impact your food choices, or even pause to reflect on the type of relationships you have with food? Today, I wanted to have a guest who could help us think about these topics in a slightly different way. And it is my hope that her journey will allow you to consider alternative ways of thinking about and maybe even approaching your wellness journey. Today's guest is Isabel Chiara. Isabel is the author of Eat Your Words, which is not your typical self-help diet book, but, one that is told in a nice little story. It's more narrative, it's semi-autobiographical, and she really wants to explore this concept of food and how we think about it. The book expertly coaches its life lessons in the expertise of an uber relatable girl whose early life and curvaceous entry into womanhood is shared. And she talks a little bit about the hearty Italian appetite in her story, talking about that complex carb life and all the things that many of us have, struggled with. So I'm really hoping that Isabel will inspire you to explore how you look at food and use that perspective to eradicate constricting beliefs that may have hindered you in the past. And with that, Isabel, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Thank you, Tony. I'm so excited to be with you. I got to speak to you for a few minutes, and I get how fun and interesting you are.
Yes, I want to be fun and interesting. And I think,
as you relate to real life issues.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to be a real good doctor, a real good podcaster, and a YouTuber, you have to be authentically who you are. And I think that all voices need to be heard, and everybody has an audience, and no matter how big or small, I think we all have value to add to the world. So, and that's why I'm so happy to have you here. Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about who you are and your background and a little bit about, what led to you writing your book. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I'm not an author, but I am an author now.
Let's start there. I know that feeling.
But I always thought I would write a book, and I tried to find all these topics, but they weren't as relatable to me. And I find that the topic that probably gives us the most discomfort in our life, maybe the thing we're really hiding from in our life. And for me, it was my relationship with food. And I figured that I always said, I was like, I cannot write about this. I just can't. It's so it was something that I just kept hidden. And, I had a lot of shame around it. And as I speak about it now, I'm perfectly okay with it, because as you start to talk about your relationship with food and overeating and binging and binge dieting and whatever under the stars we want to call it, people have the same type of behaviors, except for maybe they're not putting it in front, hanging it on their head or hat, right? And they're doing their thing and they're able to control it in different areas of their life. But I find that it's something that's always front and center, because you're actually having another relationship. Even though it's not talking back to you, probably reason why I said eat your words is because we're probably talking back. We're talking back to ourselves all the time.
Absolutely.
So we're using the food as the as an item to talk back to ourselves, or to, listen to ourselves, or, because at times I always say, hey, food is calling me. Right? Do you ever have that experience where
Oh yeah.
you drive by a billboard on the highway and it's like, oh my God, and you can hear that burger calling you in,
It's
and
Krispy
you're
Kreme.
answering it back, and you're saying, oh, no, 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 we're not going there, we're not doing it.
That's
But
right.
then, I always call that like the rebellious part of our psyche or ourselves. And the more we're saying no, the more we're saying yeah, no, yes, at some level, right? But anyway, so during COVID, I put this story together, never thinking I was ever going to really put the book together. Really, I was going to just write the book and finish this book.
Mhm.
I had tried to write it for like 10 years, but you're always in a process, because the book came about and with not really a solution. There's not a one way solution for anybody to curb their patterns, or, I mean, there's so many different modalities that I tried, and I figured out that I had 30 years of looking at every modality, and very alternative things. I started getting into the healing, the world of healing and spiritual world, and used a lot of that in order to um, help allow me to look at things different and get a
Mhm.
different perspective on everything. So even though it's about food, it's really how you do your life
Yeah,
also.
and that's important. Um, I used to say, and I kind of still do. I say, "What's the most important thing?" And I'll say nutrition, but I really think it's how you think. How you
Yeah.
think matters. How you perceive the world matters, and I just think that if you can get that right, and I've heard quotes about that, your success is, 20% knowledge, but 80%, how you think and how you
And how you see
respond,
your
how
and
you
how you
see
see yourself,
all
right?
of that.
And how you hear yourself, and it's
Even with
all of it.
that author thing you said, I've had one book and I didn't feel like an author. I still don't. But I just had to learn. I became a writer when I was comfortable just again going back to authenticity. I just became Tony. Just Tony, just write what your experience
Yeah.
is, share it with the world. Don't worry about the details. Let somebody edit it and just write it. And once I put that in my brain, all of a sudden, maybe I became a writer in that moment. I just let it go and stopped worrying
Yeah.
about it. So I think that's really kind of cool how that works. And so I'm really happy that you've had a similar experience. So I think about some of my favorite books. I had a book by the name of the religious book, The Shack,
Mhm.
that financial book, The Wealthy Barber. Those are all written as stories, and
Mhm.
they're very engaging. So, what about your journey led you to, instead of just writing a self-help book like most people, that
Right.
has, do this, that, you really want it to be a story. What inspired you to make it a story?
Because my life is very funny,
Okay.
because because I have a humorous side to me, and
Mhm.
you know, I know for me, if someone's telling me what to do, that really doesn't work for me.
Mm.
So if you relate things in terms of a story, and it becomes like, oh yeah, I kind of think like that, because in the story I get really into this. Her name is Gianna Giovanni, the character,
Mhm.
and she really develops every belief that she created. She gives the foundation of how she created these beliefs in her life, whether they're historical from her parents, and it goes into the history of an Italian heritage parents, that were in World War II, both of them, and how they experienced the war and what happened to them. And you wonder, like, oh my God, no wonder I, we never even thought about it. No wonder we create certain beliefs within our own life on how we're going to live our life and how we're going to create these. I call them isms, like it's going to be, this is the way it is, when in fact, really life is not the way it is. So it talks about how, all these different stories, and including relationships that didn't work out, and how she decides to close herself off to other relationships and be disconnected, and then connected more with food. And it goes through like a whole life process with these interesting storylines. And so it's quite funny. And the storylines are really developed along the lines of, binging. And even there's like a scene where, the Gianna's on the phone talking to her sister while she's chewing and munching and stuff, and she's getting called out on her. Are you eating? Are you eating? And she's like, no, and she's like muting the phone. And so it's just that kind of stuff that's going on, and behind the scenes, um, how life goes on, and you're also thinking, oh my God, I really got to do something about this behavior,
That's right.
But so you find a few solutions, and you find a few diets. And of course, she's tried every single diet. And, that's also very interesting, how close the diet came to her schooling. Also, one of the diets was a person who was the master of one of the schools that she went to, and how that led to a certain relationship in the future. But that's a whole. But there's a so I think that the book was never going to come out because, at the end of the book, there was still never a solution, except for the fact that she came to terms with a lot of ideas on how to process different patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So what I work with people, also myself, and is really connecting to what the different words are that people are speaking, and what are the different parts of themselves that are creating like these beliefs and what they are, and really getting down to the root of what is causing the behavior, what's missing, what's not there. How do you say things when you're about to eat? How do you feel right before you're about to eat? And all of that is just an opening. And I feel like that's what the book is. The book is just an opening to all of the information that could possibly be inside of these behaviors. And then ultimately, I just think that, you get to the point where you love yourself, regardless of what the behavior is. Otherwise, your body is in a state of stress and emotion all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
I can't help my patients if I can't help them see what you're saying. And as a physician or any clinician who would hear our voice today, if we don't address those things, the root causes of why we are not compliant, if we want to use that term, then the chances that we'll be successful convincing anybody of an approach that you feel is helpful is very low. So that's been one of the gifts of having an acronym that reminds me of that, the nest and the rope. It reminds me that there's other things that we need to be thinking about. And I'm going to make sure that I put that in my brain in the very beginning. And then my hope is that this podcast will do just that. So, and I don't need to have all the solutions right now. I just need to know that I need to be thinking about peeling that onion and peeling it until we get to the root cause. So I love that. And I did a whole episode, podcast episode number 14, I think. And I talked
what a memory you have.
Man, you better. Well,
I've shared it.
I share it sometimes with patients. I share it. And in that episode, I talk about, how we need to focus on avoiding self-limiting thinking.
Right.
And it kind of resonates with me listening to you. And I'm curious from your perspective, when you when you think about those self-abusive internal dialogues that we have with ourselves that can be harmful,
Mhm.
and some are associated with what we eat,
Mhm.
what type of, how should we be dealing with those self-limiting beliefs, those, you know, that dialogue that we constantly have with
Right.
ourselves? How do we overcome that?
Right. Okay, good one. So, I think the first thing is awareness. However you need to get to awareness, and, like, even listening to somebody's story or listening to somebody talk about what they're what they think about things, right? Or, how someone is how someone else is approach you could ask other people how they're approaching their own meal, right? I would go back for myself, and I would look exactly as what am I saying to myself before I do one of these things, because I know once it would be a it's a nonstop once you start.
Hmm.
So at some point, you're going back and you're looking. And I noticed some of the words that I used to say because I was really interested in. And if you tell anybody to write it down, they would think you're crazy. But if you just start to get familiar with a few of whatever the thoughts are of what you're saying, I used to say, I'm just going to eat anything. I used to say things like, I just want to eat anything I want. I don't, and I used the first thing that would allow me to go in and without any disregard for myself, which is really key because you're at some point we're disregarding ourselves,
Hmm.
right? And I'd say, I don't care. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter. And I don't care. I think those words, which helped in life, right? So everything that, didn't work as far as food and relationship with food worked in other aspects of the life, but then you get to some point where it doesn't work anymore because someone saying they don't care is not, I don't care about you out in the world. It's, I don't care about me inside of me.
Hmm.
Right. So that was a defensive reaction as a child, by constantly being, criticized or hurt or something that was going on in a childhood, which most people have. A lot of people have that. Even if they have the sweetest parents in the world, they could have said one thing one time and they could have
Hmm.
fallen apart,
Hmm.
right? And then felt like, and our responsibility to ourselves is how we respond to whatever the behavior was as a child or how whoever parented us. How what did they say to us? Oh, you got a B instead of an A in your report card. Let's just say that, for instance, right? And you from then on thought that there was something wrong with you. You weren't intelligent. There was, and then you applied it to your life and you applied it to the way you think, and it became your way of how you look at things in life. So I think we're always in process. When we say, okay, we're going to do this diet, it's not black and white.
Hmm.
Okay. We're not really doing a diet. We know the diets just don't work. It's really about connecting to ourself. And that would mean the thing where I said, I don't care, right? Those words of I'm not caring now translate to, okay, maybe I do care. Maybe I do care. And those words start to shift as we shift
Hmm.
our own processes. As we get more in tune with those words, I think it has a direct corollary effect with the amount of food we eat. You know what I mean? So maybe it's like we're not having every meal that's like over indulgent, but maybe we're being a little bit, more like, I'm going to eat this because this is nutritious.
Hmm.
So these are new words that we're bringing to the plate,
I
right?
I think about um, what you just said and with the diet's not working, and it really makes me understand why. I mean, if we don't protect our nest, then the diets won't work. Like if we don't address what we're talking about now, how
Right.
we perceive things and look at things, of course it's not going to work because you really haven't gotten to the root cause of uh, why people struggle. I think about Dr. Eric Westman, who's been doing low carb research since 2002. He has
Mm-hmm.
plenty of success stories, but But a lot of that is probably rooted in the support that he provides with his Adapt Your Life, team. And they have a team of people so sometimes when we're in trouble and there's somebody that's like, hey, there's trouble, so let's support you. I think about Dr. Joan Iflin of the Reset community and the work she's doing for processed food addiction. So if you don't address the addiction, and we talked a little bit about sugar before we got started, then you're going to
Mhm.
struggle. You're going to struggle to be successful. And
Mhm.
so it's very difficult.
Well, when you're talking about the sugar, right?
Yeah.
I think at some point, well, the sugar definitely becomes a physical, emotional. I feel like sugar is now on every single level.
Mm,
I think sugar's a thing that calls. I always have these things, like the sugar is calling us.
mm,
A friend of mine who was an acupuncturist used to test through kinesiology how close you needed to be to sugar in order to get activated within your body. Have you ever heard of this?
mm-hmm,
Okay. So he tested me one time, and I was moving for out more and more. He goes, if you're within 250 feet of sugar, you are activated with sugar.
mm,
Meaning, like, my whole system could feel the sugar around it. So it's really a physical type of, thing that we're experiencing, and including, so then it gets every single one of our sensories, right? And it gets our
yeah,
mind starts to go,
right.
our mind starts to speak to us in words. Okay, I want sugar, I want sugar. And
Yeah,
then that becomes, it's like there's no other part of ourselves except for that one speaking part that's going sugar, 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 like whatever. I want this, I want this. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a donut, it's creamy, it's a this, it's a chocolate. Um, so that was one of the other things I tried, acupuncture, and then I did other things where I would try to connect with the sugar and watch it being released from my body, kind of as an energetic, physical release. So there's many, many things that one would try and stuff, but we're in a process, and we have to allow ourselves to know that we're in that process,
yeah.
right?
We're very simple creatures. I
Right,
need food. I need shelter. I need love, and once that's all taken care of, give me a little pleasure. Right
right.
now, if you can give me pleasure, that'll activate my dopamine and my euphoria, my adrenaline, all these pleasure type things. Um, I'm gonna seek that out, and I'm gonna seek it out over and over again. So I do not at all. I drive by Oberweis, which sells the ice cream in our area, and that smell of ice, milk or whatever I'm smelling, it's hard to not seek that when it enters your
Mhm.
nose. So and I had no clue, having Dr. Z on my previous podcast episode talking about essential oils. He talked about how when you inhale something, it's it's very powerful. It's very
Yeah.
powerful, and I could see how, even with this discussion, how powerful it is. So I just think that we have to take that understanding and say, okay, that's something that can, once I understand that it's harmful, then maybe I need to maybe I don't drive by Oberweis. I'm gonna take a different route. I'm
Right.
gonna because I don't want to put myself through that temptation and that desire. And I heard you speak in the past about mindful eating.
Mhm.
So I want you to talk a little bit about, what does that mean, mindful eating?
Mhm. Okay. Very difficult, I think, for someone that's has allows Oberwise to call them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I think really mindful eating is more intentional eating. It's almost like creating the space for your eating and creating a more structure around it of what you would want. Because I've noticed that people that, or myself, that if I allow it to be a free for all, which is another
Mhm.
word that
Mhm.
is not, it's less confining, but still at the end of the day, a free for all could be anything. And then, you're in this like universe of options. Um, but if you create more of um, a structure around foods that you like, foods that are going to nurture you, and you connect with that food because it feels right for you. To me, that's like 85 or 90% of the whole game here. You know,
Mhm.
so it's something that I'm more intentional about for myself. And when other things come up, I still allow myself, the other stuff that maybe aren't as nutritional for me, but I'm okay. I allow myself to be okay with that instead of going back and having a conversation about how that wasn't great and I was a
Mhm.
failure
Mhm.
because I ate this 10% of this food was awful. Right. So it's really just connecting to, um, the foods that are going to really be benefit, but it's really connecting on a body level, like
Mhm.
connecting through your body, not through your mind necessarily, even though it's all processed through your mind. It's really like feeling, because I feel like we feel food.
Mhm.
Do you get that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
the last thing I would ever crave was vegetables. Like
Mhm.
we don't go around craving, vegetables,
Mhm.
but if I really paid attention, just in the last like few weeks, for some reason, I've been craving broccoli,
Mm.
which is like, what, like, what the heck is that? But I was setting myself up literally to start to crave other things besides sugar and sweets. So I opened up my campus on some level, right, for myself, and started feeling. I believe that if we set our intention, we could start to feel with our intention, and it starts to create this bigger, arena for ourselves, and how to open up a different part of us that's not been
Mhm.
opened yet. So um, yeah, so because I started that, I started my what started opening up was this whole vegetables and some
Mhm.
lighter proteins and more grains,
Mhm.
which I was never ever going to do grains, but it's I noticed my body instead, because I don't forget, it's a disconnection with the body. I noticed the body began to feel like at home. I don't know how to describe that sensation. It's like, oh, like it's like the body can breathe. Oh, like this feels okay now. It doesn't have to be in that constant panic
Mhm.
or stress feeling when it's eating because it doesn't know what to eat or
Mm.
when to eat, or just like if something shows up, it's just going to go for it. It's it starts to have a timing of its own. It starts
Mhm.
to have a feeling of its own. And the body starts to
Mhm.
breathe in different foods.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
it sounds like there was a little bit of an experiment, as you've kinda explored things you hadn't tried.
Hmm.
I really encourage patients to listen to their body. If they have to
Yeah,
do an
for
elimination
sure.
diet, go that far with it if necessary, but then as you add things back, if it's not resonating with you,
Hmm.
that's okay. I don't, I've said this on previous podcasts, me and Brussels sprouts don't get along. So why would I then force myself to eat something like that?
Hmm.
If I have a diabetic patient, I'll say, I want you to reduce your processed food and your seed oils and your carbs, but you know, if you eat something that is in a different category. Let's just call it, let's even go to the grains,
Hmm.
and your body responds to it in a way that's favorable, then have at it. Some of my diabetics, I find that they just can't do it. They'll eat quinoa, something like that, and then their sugars go up. So what I do is I bio-individuality. So I'll say, you got these continuous glucose monitors. Let's see what happens. Listen to your body. And then as you learn this, like you said, structure, I like that term, because now we're going to create a structure. Rather, it's how we, what we have in our homes, what we have at work, and we're going to create a structure that's going to allow us to have the right things around us. That didn't include the cheat days at Oberweis, but the structure around me is going to be supportive of me feeling good, enjoying a healthy lifestyle, metabolically healthy, et cetera. So I really appreciate that, because I think that people have to listen to their body. And I think that what you've done is you've listened. Your body has kind of told you what it likes and doesn't like, and you're using that to be successful. Now, I have patients who come to me, and I have a older population. Sometimes they say, "I'm too old, doc, to change."
Right. It's kind of like a free-for-all. It's a free-for-all. I'm too
Man,
old. It's a
I'm too
free-for-all.
old. I'm too old. It's
I
hopeless.
only got 20 years left.
Right. I'm gonna enjoy those 20
I
years.
gotta eat whatever I want. All 365 days a year.
That's right. And you just wonder, what do you say to people? I try to talk to them about, okay, yeah, you're 75. You're saying you got 20 years left, but man, what are we going to have some quality years? So the question is, you got this family around you that you want to be here for. You also don't want to have dementia, and all these other things that can happen. We talked a little bit about how sugar may be a root cause of why people get dementia, right? So,
Yes.
so when you're talking to people,
It's
and
a root cause of all. It's the root cause of
it's the
everything.
root cause of everything.
Inflammation, everything.
We can end this conversation right now and just say, sugar, stop that. You're right. So what do you do? What do you do when you have people who are having, again, going a little bit back to the self-limiting beliefs? Oh, I'm too fat. It's hopeless. I'm too old. What do you say to people who they continue to say those types of things? What advice do you
I think it's really key to figure out what they really want, right? Because you can say whatever you want, and they're not going to do anything unless they really want something.
What's your why?
Yeah. What's your why?
Yeah.
So if they don't really want anything, and they just want to, but having said that, what is I want to know what the visual is or what the words are in their head, right? How do they see themselves? Like, I know, I think a lot of people have a visual of, if they're heavy, they just have that heaviness feeling in their body, in their mind, and in their soul, like in their life, right? Have you ever noticed that there's stuff around them? There's like a heaviness all around them, right? So is that what they do? Do they want to lighten up their life? Like, what are those words that might tweak a little kind of interest in them? I like to bring people through a process of how do they see themselves and how it could just shift a little bit. So if you could get a little bit of shift and have a success, one little success, and hear the words and, whatever that is. And I think it's like an art form to figure out what that is, and I like to do this with people and really get down the bottom and really inspire them to see some kind of a result and feel a result. I like to see results before they really experience the results. So they're really they're really seeing the results in their mind or their psyche, right?
Yeah.
So that's, what, and I don't know if it's, well, you're a full formed doctor, right? You give it all.
Yeah.
So, so then them seeing the possibility of it and feeling, I think a lot of people's feeling the possibility of it, because you could see it and then just be like, yeah, that's way out there. It's not there. How do you bring that in?
Listen, this is episode number,
72.
I don't know, 72, right? Whatever. Right?
Good memory.
I have no idea how I got to this point. And if you had told me, okay, when I started this, by this time you would have had that many episodes. I'm like, I don't even have time to be a leader and a husband and a father and and obviously doing YouTube videos. And you're right. I think we it goes back to what we always say to people is, if you're gonna eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. I just think that people need to know a path. Like, I made a video recently on YouTube talking about how to achieve generational wealth, and I talked about the lottery. And
Wow.
but it's just $150 a month from the time you're 20 to retirement, and it's $2.6 million. And the thing is, somebody has to put that vision in a little baby's head, a little teenager, really a college age kid, because that's the age you could maybe get to the point where you can make those investments. So it makes sense to me that we need to be able to help people see things that they can't see. And that's why this podcast and the videos and interactions that we have one-on-one with people are so important, just to get us to think outside the box. Again, the last guest talking about essential oils, he's talking about stuff that most people have never heard. And he contrasted how almost all medicines came from nature. And so what's the difference between essential oils and medicine? Not much, except that you'll probably have it in a form that's less likely
Well,
to cause harm.
all medicine is made from the plant.
All of it,
And here we
mostly.
are not using herbs to
Right.
heal, right?
Well, we're
I
not in
mean,
America, but those folks elsewhere, they
well,
are.
no one wants to hear about it,
I know.
right?
Well,
They don't wanna hear about
they
it.
don't want to hear about it at all. So I'm really amazed at.
But medicine takes a derivative of the plant.
That's
That
right.
isn't how it works. The plant works because it's in its entirety.
Isn't
Kind of like us. We have a body, mind, a soul, and a spirit. We
That's
can't
right.
take this one aspect of us and like beat it up and leave it like this one, part. We need every part of us engrossed and in it, the whole thing.
That's the biggest flaw in research, is that
Yes.
what you just said is, if anybody listening, it's not the onion in the soup, it's not the carrot in the soup, it's
Right.
not the broth, it's the soup.
Right.
Sometimes it's the soup that makes us feel better. Sometimes it's the fact that mama made the
The
soup,
soup.
and mama kissed us after she gave us the soup.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she rubbed something on our chest to make us feel better after the soup.
Exactly.
So it's all of that stuff. And if
Two
we
people, Tony, can make the exact same thing. And you could taste something that one person made and another person made with the same ingredients and everything. And so my nephews used to say to me, their mother,
mhm.
their mother used to say, I made it exactly like your aunt. It doesn't taste the same. And I would say, well, you forgot to put some love into it. Right? Because how are you supposed to blend it all together if you don't have love into it and you didn't cook it? If you hate cooking, just don't do it.
Right. That's not your gift. Let's do something
You
else.
just so it's when you're like, it's like it's the same thing when you're listening to someone or you're talking to somebody.
Mhm.
I'm sure people come to you and they get healed just because you are speaking and you're listening to them and you understand exactly what they're coming from. Probably the first time they're getting heard because they're probably in their family doing and not being heard. So that's frustrating to people and a psyche. And how do you
It's deep.
right?
Let me tell you
Yeah.
something. This happened today. The day we recorded this, I sent it to my wife. I just recorded me and the patient, and so I said, tell my wife what you call me. And she said, I call you my son. And she's serious, like, you're my son. And she was so serious. So it's all about, man, these relationships and how we perceive each other.
Mhm.
And I just think that you can just feel it. And I just
Right.
thank God that I'm able to connect with
Mhm.
patients that way,
Right.
that they would call me their son. And some of them, it's so funny because I feel like we went to church a moment ago. some of them come in and say, Pastor.
Mhm.
And I say, I do a lot of preaching in my clinic, trust me. But some of them even go that far because they have so much respect for their pastors, right? So if they elevate you to the level of a pastor, oh my God, it's amazing. So I'm so
You're like
blessed to,
exalted.
yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm walking on water. I'm doing all kinds of
Right.
stuff, turning water into
I'm gonna make some
wine.
wine here.
That's right.
In 1 minute.
Yeah,
We're gonna call it your medicine.
that's right. And
Mhm.
so I love it. One more thing that, I'm thinking about as we're talking about this, so many people, because maybe they're missing something and they resort to food to treat their emotion. So any
Mhm.
thoughts on, why so many people resort to food when they're not emotionally in a good place?
Yeah, because isn't it easier to just not deal with your emotion than it is to deal with your emotion? But I mean, I really believe the reason that most people eat is because of their emotional well-being, how they feel
Mhm.
emotionally.
Mhm.
And and then what do they say to themselves during that emotional, I mean, what is the emotion anyway? I mean, it's what it really is something happens and you're reacting because there's a story there that you're
Mhm.
saying. So you're relating to a story or something maybe not really happening. Maybe it's happening, but then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So maybe our appetite gets bigger and bigger and bigger
Right.
because we need to digest what's happening. And if we can't digest what's really happening, it's really, we're filling ourselves because we feel bad, we feel sad, we have feelings. We're not acknowledging what the feelings are, and then we need to put a cap on it,
Mm.
right? Otherwise, it's going to blow up it's just too much it's too much to handle because the story's getting bigger and bigger
Mm.
around it.
I'm gonna start calling you Pastor if you keep talking.
Yeah,
I love that, and it makes so much
I've been
sense.
looking at this from every angle.
Hey, well, it's interesting because again, the whole point of this conversation is to help those listening to look at it from different angles
Yes.
through lenses that they hadn't thought about, and I just think that's so important. And I just think our
Yeah.
thoughts are so important. Again,
Right.
that's why I had that episode talking about how we think. I just
Right.
think that putting things in a more
Mhm.
positive light is
Mhm.
more likely to
Right.
serve you. And a lot of times people struggle to do that. And I just see more benefit in that way of thinking
Mhm.
because a negative way of thinking rarely does
Right.
that lead to anything that's
Yeah,
really helpful.
but the question would be like, how do you do that if that's not been part of your upbringing or if that's not been part of your right? If
You know
you
what I
have
did? You gotta feed yourself. You know what I do? I'll listen to Les Brown, Anthony Robbins,
yes,
Jim Rohn,
right.
and
Like
at
you like
nauseum.
we feed ourselves food,
Just
we're
keep it.
feeding ourselves conversation, other people's positive music, all that stuff is soothing to the brain. It's really soothing our um the trauma centers of our
Mhm.
body, right? Our nervous system. So having someone talk as if they're speaking to you very
Mhm.
motivationally, telling you you could do it. Maybe at some point that becomes your own brain, the words of your own psyche or your own brain saying that to yourself. So any way to fill all of that up, and
I
I
think
think
so.
the real gift that one could give themselves, or I found even for myself, is when we're doing things that we decided not to do or aren't in our best interest or we're going against what we said we're going to do because that's really kind of what happens, right? You say, okay, I'm going to eat healthy today, and then in the next meal you're eating everything but healthy, right? That we say, okay, okay, we got it,
Yep.
we're gonna do something, we're gonna try this, you needed to do that for some reason, like that understanding compassionate side of ourselves that we never give ourselves,
Yeah.
you
And the
know
coaching, I've shared on this podcast, I have a leadership coach, relationship coach, and
Mhm.
they really help to make us, kind of reflect and think
Right,
differently. And a
right.
lot of times you can really
Yeah.
reframe a situation
Right,
just by
right.
simply looking at it differently. In fact, speaking of that, I think about my perception of myself.
Mhm.
And my wife will say, let your hair, just let your beard grow and just, keep a beard. And she likes that. And then my brain is saying, it's going to make me look older because it's like, salt and pepper, right? And so part of me wants to be comfortable with my aging process as I've crossed over into the 50 range. And then but I also like this part of me that wants to be vibrant, young, and show that side too, even as I try to inspire other people. So there's this balance, right? And I'm trying to figure out even how I perceive myself. How do I balance it so that it's definitely leaning positive, but it's not so leaning positive that I don't accept that we're getting older and it's okay. So is there a way to kind of balance those things so that we're benefiting both aspects, because they both can be a positive. It's just that our perception of it tends to suggest, well, the aging part is a bad thing, and it may not be a bad thing.
Okay, I have a story about aging.
Okay.
I always say, because I feel like because I'm learning more and I'm getting wiser.
Mm-hmm.
It's how I'm holding it. It's my perspective, right? So it's a great way for people to hold it, because maybe that's your audience here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's. I always say, have you ever heard of you've heard of this? It's like a fine wine. You get more graceful and more
Mm-hmm.
wise with age,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's
you
true.
taste better, and so it's. I feel like life gets deeper, more profound, more. Uh, like you could feel more of it. It's like luscious. So the older you get, the more luscious you get
Mm.
on some level,
Luscious, that's what I'm talking about. I
right?
like that. Yeah,
You
that's
know,
nice.
um, you have so many new lessons. You're trying to you try to figure out life, and hopefully, most of what you've thought about life is, things that are working for you, not working
Mm.
for you, because you've already had all these experiences of everything not working for you. So if we're in the process of, like, right now, you know the more I think we live, the more we love ourselves. I mean, where are we getting to the point of where we don't like ourselves more? No, we
Mhm.
love ourselves the more we live. So if we're loving that, we're loving every aspect of ourselves. We're in our body, we're feeling that in our body, we're lighting up, we're illuminating. Aren't people feeling that?
I love it.
Yeah. So
It's
that's how I like to hold age.
I've one of the things I've tried to do as I have conversations with experts like yourself is to be present in the moment.
Mhm.
And so the podcast has really increased my knowledge in a way that I wasn't anticipating. And sometimes I'm having a conversation with a patient in another podcast or maybe even speaking in front of people, and I'll have this knowledge building up in me that is amazing. And when I think about my master's in nutrition and functional medicine with the University of Western States, I think about the things I'm learning. Again, oxalates, phytates, anti-nutrients, all these things I hadn't heard of, even
Mhm.
essential oils. I didn't know anything about essential oils in my conventional
Yeah,
training.
right.
And then I think about my leadership and having a leadership coach and having a chance to lead other clinicians. There's growth there. And so having a marriage of 28 years, there's growth there.
You're
Um,
like an expert.
I'm an expert
You're
at
an
it
expert
because
in
I've had,
relationship.
amen, I should write a book. Kids in college and what that's like to get them from babies in your arms. Can't believe it. And then
Right,
they're now, we're having conversations about, what happens when you graduate from graduate school and the other when you
right.
go to graduate school. So I think okay, I feel better. Maybe I'll let my beard grow now.
Yeah, well, don't you think Don't you think people want whatever that is you have? They want to
I
be around it. They don't know what it is,
yeah,
but they want to feel what you know. Like people want to feel like your experiences and what you're, I mean, if they're worthy, you know what I mean?
yeah,
If anyone's really interested in life, you know
yeah,
what I mean? It's not like, someone, it's somebody that's really interested in their own life and growing their life, which is who you
right.
want to be around and who you want to attract.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love it. I think
Yeah.
you're right, and um, if we're gonna be better, we may get there a little faster if we are experiencing some of what you've experienced.
Hmm.
You experienced some of what I've experienced, and then
Hmm.
maybe I'll get a little closer to where I'll end up being. But I do think that we're all just a reflection again of our life
Exactly. I think
experiences and
so
the people we've
too.
been around. We're just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So a little Jim Rohn, the motivational speaker, I'll make a quote. I may even not even remember it came from him, but that'll be my quote all of a sudden. It'll be things that I say and do because of his inspiring messages when he was around. So, and and I want to ask you about focus, because I know that when I focus on things that I care about, like this podcast, it grows and I
Yeah.
find success because of that. So, how important is it for people to, once they have a sense of where they're trying to go, to focus on those things?
Um, okay. Well, they could focus on a million things and not get
Hmm.
anywhere. That's
That's
another
a
distraction
yeah.
that people do. I'll just start there.
Right.
um, but I say we focus on what is comes to us easily. In the beginning of this podcast, you told me you were a teacher and
Hmm.
that your podcast is about you sharing and teaching.
Hmm.
So you're actually developing the quality that you love within yourself and you want to share it with people. Otherwise, you're experiencing more of yourself by sharing it with other people, right? And it's like a great connection. It's great collaborative to do that. So I think it's the same thing with what are people focusing? I mean, I think that what COVID did for a lot of people was it took away a lot of their lifestyle, what they did, their to-dos. And then they were left with, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Hmm.
And a lot of people developed a lot of talents that were latent, that were in them, that they always said, I'm going to do it later on in life. I know that I have a cousin of mine that started studying Japanese, and from studying Japanese, developed this creative field within their brain, like this part of their brain opened up.
Mm.
And they started doing this artwork that was like spectacular during COVID and is now in like a museum.
Mm.
I mean, that to me is like amazing. So it's that kind of stuff when you hear other people, like if I tell that story to you right now, people that have that artist quality within them or wanted to really be creative and stuff could say right now, wow, that just opened up some cells inside of me or
Mm.
something connected me with that. And they can do something about it right now. Or maybe they did. So their focus will now shift into that part of themselves where they maybe
Mhm.
thought it wouldn't in the past because they were too busy being in the job they didn't love.
Mm.
And now all these people are being mandated to do, vaccines and they're
That's
losing their
right.
jobs. And maybe there's another opportunity for them somewhere else. Like they get to choose something else. Like they're
Mm.
not forced, or even though they're forced to do something. So I like to think that if something happens in life, it's creating change inside of you that
Mhm.
you could look at it as a good thing or a bad thing. I like to think it's like there for us and not
Mhm.
to us, you know? So this is an opportunity for people to do something greater, do something they always wanted to do, come from within and really, trust themselves, build themselves up, love themselves more. And because they're going to have to trust themselves, right? If you don't have your job and you don't have whatever you're losing, and you can't even look at it as a loss. Whatever's shifting is really what it is.
Mm.
It's could be something so great. You're just shifting into another field that you didn't anticipate,
You know,
right?
I think about some of my previous guests who, many of whom, because they made a lifestyle change, now their life's work is helping people with lifestyle change. It's just the craziest thing,
Isn't it
right?
interesting?
What the heck? So
Right.
so
Well, I mean,
for
so
us,
people can't if you start to say or put yourself in a bubble of like, oh my God, this job was my whole life. I can't do anything. You're kind of done. We have to have a conversation about I just got this great opportunity to do whatever I want in my life. Like life brought this to me, and now let's go see what's out there for me.
I
So
never
many people
intended
there.
Yeah, I never intended to be a leader in healthcare. I never intended to be a podcaster. I never intended to be a YouTuber. And all of a sudden, I'm doing all of those things. So I'm amazed at how life happens. You said for us,
Mm-hmm.
or to us, right? Is it being done to you or for? So I think for me, I'm very happy to face those challenges, whether it's a job loss or a difficult, crucial conversation you have to have, because it does make you stronger. And if you don't sharpen the saw, and what Stephen Covey said, if you don't get a chance to just practice and sharpen the tools of how to live this life, then you won't really be able to live it and enjoy it. And one of the things I love about the challenges we're facing now is that it's really made us stronger. And
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that. And I don't want anybody to lose their lives or suffer.
Right.
But man, when you're facing these kind of challenges, I mean, just going from in-person visits to video visits was a challenge, and you just had to figure it out. So I really appreciate that, that perspective. And one thing I wanted to ask you is about, we talked about, your relationship, with food, and sometimes you have to break up with bad relationships with food in order to be successful. So when we have foods that we know can be harmful, like sugar, um, how do we break up with that? Because it's hard to. We talked about how addictive sugar is as an example.
We get to sell this podcast for $1 million if we can figure out how to do the breakup.
Amen. I like that. So we're still on a journey.
Yes, we're on a journey.
And I guess what you're also saying is that if we take a moment, as I suggested earlier, and we reflect and we pause and we at least analyze. And one of the things I did in my leadership was to be medical director of the Advocate operating system, which is my healthcare system, before we merged. And in that role, we did Lean, which is the Toyota business practices, and how they, and with that way of thinking, we're always pausing at the end of an event. So if we have a healthy living event
Mm-hmm.
where we teach in front of our patients, we have to huddle afterwards and say, what did we do well? What can we do better? And it was like everybody had to answer. So as we think about our life journey, we need to do that, rather it's in our relationship, how we're doing at work, how we interact with our kids. If we have kids, what can we do better? What are we doing well? And then I think if we pause and reflect on that, I think we'll find nuggets. We'll find, oh, I didn't know you felt that way about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do better. Oh, thank you for acknowledging that you appreciate the fact that I sent you a message with my patient saying that I'm her son, and that touched you, so I think that those are the things that we do, but we have to pause and reflect. So I want you to pause and reflect and think about my nest and my rope, my nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, avoiding trauma or recovering from trauma, making sure we think a certain way. And of course, making sure our rope is protected as well, relationships, avoiding organisms and pollutants that harm us. And of course, making sure our emotions are safe and making sure our life experiences serve us. So when you think about that nest and rope, when you think about your journey, where do you think the next 12 months will be for you? What are you going to focus on?
So, wow. Um, so for me, the next 12 months would be more of a love and appreciation of myself, for sure. And really, uh, for me also, it's always been my journey. So I just think it's more of it, to really spin things into the positive, really keeping that, because it's something that I'm so good at doing for everybody else. And then I don't give myself enough of it myself. But it's shifted, and I could say it's black and white, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good. But it's not. It's been evolving because we're in the process, so it's been evolving. So I don't look at it from okay over here, and I'm not here yet. I'm looking at it from right here and saying, okay, I'm so here, and I'm excited because I know I'm going to be over here. More looking at things like more positive. And another thing I'm creating is more miracles and synchronicities in my day. You know, just having those thoughts and drawing things to me that are reflected of those thoughts and what I'm trying to create in my life also. And for me, it's about the process and how it's being unfolded and how it feels within me. Um, Also, in the process of my second book, which is, well, it's about a lot more solutions, really concrete solutions, for people to look at. And so that also will be in that will be completed. I just know it. You know, at some
Yeah.
point when you start creating all these things, you just know in your system that it's already a done deal. Because there's not really time or space on some level. It's kind of already
Mm-mm.
happening, and it's
Yeah.
like right here, and it's right now. And there's something bubbling up for me as far as um, travel and food, and probably Europe. And it just kind of
Mm.
opened up like a couple of weeks ago, and I that's going to be unfolding for me because I could feel the intensity of it, like
Mm-hmm.
percolating. And I think that uh, more speaking about
Mm-hmm.
what is really going on with people, and I'm trying also figuring out other modalities to work with people in a larger
Mm-hmm.
scale. I think that will be developing into a some kind of process and some
Mm-hmm.
kind of event
Right.
eventually also.
And
So I don't care what it is. I put into effect how it's going to feel and how it's going to look for me. And then I think that these things just eventually show up,
mm, and
because you pull it in.
you're an emotional being and spiritual being, and I can feel it in your words and in your voice. And
Mhm.
appreciate that. Again, that is something for everybody listening to consider. Are we manifesting our emotional and spiritual parts of us in a way that'll help us along our way? So I'm
Mhm.
loving all of that, and I feel all of it. So thank you for sharing that. And the next thing I want you to share is how people can get more of you. If they want to get
Mm.
more of you, how do they find you, including the book that you wrote?
Mhm. Well, they can go on Isabel Chiara, my website, ISABEL Chiara, CHIARA.com. Your listeners can download a free chapter of the book. so they can get a taste of what
Cool.
the book is about.
That's right.
And they can, through my website, sign up for a private session with me, and I'm sure they will love every moment of. I'm not for the weary at heart. I'm for a person that really wants to know themselves and
Mhm.
really wants to have a life change, some kind of real shift in their patterns. But it's really, well, how you do food is how you do life,
I
right?
like that. Yeah, I like that. Nice
You
way
can't
to
do it one way. You got to do it
okay. We need a little.
both ways are
That's
going to be
right.
happening simultaneously.
That's right. So all the foodies out there, some nice nuggets there. So thank you so much. I'm so glad we were connected. I'm so happy that you're helping to spread some of these letters and my acronyms and the messages that we shared today. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you. I thank you for being here and looking forward to that book. Looking
Hmm.
forward to all the people you're going to touch with your message and helping us to think differently about food and making sure we keep our emotions on the front of our thoughts. So thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here today.
Tony, and thank you. I love what you're doing in the world. I love your messages, everything that we just spoke about too. You're amazing also.
I appreciate that. Words of affirmation. I'll
Uh-huh.
never get enough of that. So thank you so much. Okay. And for those who are listening, today my guest helped us think about aspects of our health related journey from the
Mhm.
perspective of how we think, our relationships to food, and even how our emotions may impact whether we are successful. So, as you can see, being successful on your journey may require some reflection. And I ask everybody listening to reflect and think about what was shared today. So, that reflection may provide some insights that, if faced, could provide a cleaner path to achieving your health related goals. I am truly amazed how much I've learned as we complete episode number 72
Mhm.
and feel that you and I have all evolved as we learn from experts like Isabel. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And as we conclude, I only ask that you be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.